Welcome to the School of Doctrine. I am Apostle Michael Orokpo, and we are on a series on the doctrine of salvation. We began studying the doctrine of salvation by looking at the eternal purpose of God, the counsel of God as captured within His wisdom in extending and fulfilling His agenda in the face of the earth. And we said it was only going to be possible if the man God created was consistent to the plan and the pattern that God had in His heart before He began the protocol. And the man we said God created was a man that had the nature and the likeness of God, a man that lived perpetually in intimacy with God, and on the strength of that intimacy sustains within himself the capacity to bring creation under the government and the governance of God. This is what we call dominion. However, we realize that this man, yielding to the seduction of the devil, fell. And we said what the fall means is, first, a decline from the glory of God. The glory of God is the essence of God. What characterizes, defines the person of God, which is the fundamental part or fundamental unit of the man, the nature of God. So man fell from that nature and likeness of God. Secondly, we said man lost fellowship with God, because when God came into the garden, He said, "Adam, where art thou?" Adam was no longer there because God could no longer interact with the energy and the vibrations coming from Adam. Thirdly, we said man fell from his legal stand with God. And we looked at Psalms 8 verse 4. We said man is an enthroned being. He said, "What is man, that thou art mindful of him, that thou did visitest him? For you made him a little lower than the Elohim. You crowned him with glory and with honor." So the man is a crowned being. The man is a coronated personality. It's on the strength of his authority that he can bring creation under dominion. This is his legal stand with God. But when God came into the garden, the man was no longer where he stood in the spirit. He was no longer found where he stood among the princes in the realms of God. So God said, "Adam, where art thou?" He had fallen from his legal stand with God. And God would have to expel the man from the garden so he doesn't take of the fruit of the tree of life and become eternally damned. So the fall culminates in all of that. The fall also includes the fact that man became subject to sin, death, and corruption. The fall also brought about man's slavery to the dominion of the devil, because whoever you yield yourself servant to obey, the servant of him you are whom you have obeyed. Romans chapter 6 verse 16. So all of these things resulted in the fall. And we said the fallen man does not have the capacity to bring to pass the eternal purpose of God, which is to contact God, to contain God, and to express God. His contact with God gives him the image and the likeness of God. His containing God, which is born out of his fellowship and intimacy with God, is also a function of his nature and essence. And finally, his nature and essence and his contact with God gives him the capacity to bring creation under the government of God. This is the eternal purpose of God, that man will live in him, with him, and by him, that God will be the central essence, the center and the circumference of the reality of man. This will no longer be possible because the man no longer has the nature of God. The man is falling and the man is separated from intimacy. The man no longer functions by the economy of light. He walks down by darkness. Man is no longer a being that operates in the realm of God. So there is no way he can fulfill that eternal purpose. It's on the strength of this that salvation was necessitated. And we said in the subject of salvation, there is a protocol that God sets in place in order to ensure that man is completely saved. And we said if we look at the subject of salvation like we did, we'll realize that first God will judge the world. Then God judges the forces that keeps man in bondage. Then God separates the man from the world and the forces that keeps man in bondage, after which God begins to deal with flesh. And we said flesh is the fallen nature. We said flesh is the fallen nature. We said flesh is every form of inspiration, motivation, and empowerment that is sourced from any other thing apart from God. So we say God begins to judge flesh, and God will ensure that man lives only by the Spirit, because only that way can this man fulfill the eternal purpose of God. So we looked at the subject of flesh, and now we are proceeding further with the Bible study. And what we want to deal with today is the love of God, because we said the protocol is such that man is separated from the Word, and then man is separated